The fear of cheap imported workers driving down wages is etched deep in Australia's psyche, and the century-old spectre is rising again with the mining boom's insatiable demand for labour. The resource industry has now embraced enterprise migration agreements that bring in semi-skilled migrants en masse to staff mining projects. And leading the charge is Australia's richest person, Gina Rinehart. The government's a keen supporter of the plan, but as Greg Hoy reports, there's a rebellion brewing among unions amid allegations that the schemes are being rorted.
In feeding Asia's voracious appetite for steel, a new minefield is opening for Australia's Iron Lady.
Greetings from the Pilbara. We are in iron ore country.
Gina Rinehart is digging in on what she says is the #1 problem threatening major resource projects in Australia, an acute labour shortage.
Proposed solution, guest workers.
Her new Roy Hill iron ore project is now negotiating with government Australia's first Enterprise Migration Agreement, or EMA. Though details are confidential, it's believed this would bring in around 1,500 semi-skilled migrants such as scaffolders, riggers and bulldozer drivers.
These people have showed that they've got immense power, immense wealth, and they're prepared to go publicly and attack governments where they disagree with them.
It's true the federal government and mining associations are highly supportive of EMAs for mining investments worth $2 billion or more.
We need enterprise migration agreements to cut red tape for very large resources projects which will have a very strong demand for labour. And the biggest risk to many of these projects proceeding is simply being able to assure people that they will have the labour to do the job.
There are a number of large resource projects in Western Australia. There are a number of large resource projects under construction in Queensland in the LNG gas area. There are a number of expansions in the hard rock mining area, and they'll all be looking to see whether the Enterprise Migration Agreement is something that they can use.
But critics are highly suspicious.
All of this is shrouded in secrecy. Thousands of domestic workers are being precluded from gaining access to those jobs.
Unions claim you're just trying to please mining magnates. The process is far too secretive and Australians will miss out on those jobs.
On the contrary, enterprise migration agreements are necessary to create jobs because without them there's a real risk that some large projects won't proceed.
There's not much evidence that investment in the mining sector is being impeded. There are tens of billions of dollars being invested in the mining sector right now.
Gina Rinehart has put her proposed solution to poetry. The globe is sadly groaning with debt, poverty and strife, and billions now are pleading to enjoy a better life. And then further on, embrace multiculturalism and welcome short-term foreign workers to our shores to benefit from the export of our minerals and ores.
Gina Rinehart's proposition is that she wants to raise up the poorer people in the developing world. Some people may believe that. I don't.
There's a huge cost of bringing people from overseas, and it is a last resort. And in addition to that, they must commit to training Australians.
Critics question the track record of commitments to train Australians and have long called for a central registry and job sites for Australians who want to work in the mines.
Over the past 2 years, there's been no growth in the employed construction workforce in Australia, and a downturn in such employment, particularly in the eastern states. There are now tens of thousands of domestic workers who would like to get access to those mining industry jobs.
But won't mining companies simply prefer to use migrant workers with far less bargaining power?
I would need to be convinced that it is in a mining company's interest to bring in workers when there are Australian workers available.
That's done under the current system by the company going off and hiring a consultant to tell them that there is a shortage of local workers. And I hate to be cynical, but quite frankly, consultants will tell you anything that you want to hear if you pay them enough.
As with 457 visas for more skilled migrants, employers are required by immigration law to pay migrants the same market rate as Australians. Though there are serious concerns, this can be easily rorted. Large numbers of Chinese workers have been brought in on 457 visas by the giant Sino iron project near Karratha in Western Australia. Since 2010, unions have complained they've been seriously underpaid in breach of the law.
There are hundreds of workers from China working on half the rate that Australian workers doing the same work are on. Many of those workers, we believe, are working in breach of their visas. They're working in breach of 457 visas because they're working at semi-skilled or unskilled work. The Immigration Department has received numerous complaints about this, and they have been derelict in their duty about doing anything about it.
Did you know about this?
Look, I'm aware of that, and that is being investigated, and any breaches of the 457 or the Fair Work Act are taken very seriously. But I'd make this point. We do build in protections. We do make sure that there's hurdles that employers must cross in order to justify skilled or semi-skilled migration, and market rates must be paid.
Sino Iron says the project has been cleared by the Fair Work Ombudsman, which did in fact defer to the Immigration Department as to whether workers had been paid at the market rate.
The government needs to stop just talking about standing up for working Australians against the interests of the big mining bosses and do something practical about it and enforce their own laws.
Another example, Union Site, surrounds the tragic death in a maintenance accident last year at Dampier in Western Australia of a 28-year-old Irish scaffolder, Sean McBride, who had been brought into Australia on a 457 visa.
A number of people working for that company were brought into Australia on the pretext of being project administrators, but in fact have been employed as scaffolders. That's because they would not have been able to get visas as scaffolders. Immigration have been very slow in actually investigating that matter.
Are you familiar with this case, Minister?
Yes, I am. And again, there's a range of OHS requirements, Fair Work Australia requirements and Department of Immigration requirements. And with individual cases, there'll be individual inquiries, and where action is appropriate under any of the existing Acts of Parliament, then action will be taken.
There are now well over 80,000 workers in Australia already on 457 visas, and we are often reminded that they are only temporary. But in reality, just how temporary will these temporary migrant workers be?
This is a very important point, and I would expect that at least half, if not more, will subsequently stay on in Australia as permanent entry migrants.
Well, if a worker likes it in Australia and their employer likes them, there is capacity for them to apply for permanent migration, but the market rates must be paid, and there are other costs for bringing in overseas workers which the employer must pay, which I think means that employers will always look very closely at trying to get domestic labour before they look offshore.
A report from Greg Hoy.